Hi YouTube, I'm going to make a spinach quiche with an almond flour crust. I made one last month, but I made it with all Monterey Jack cheese. This one I'm going to make with some Gruyere cheese as well as Monterey Jack and change it up just a little bit. So I have a very small, actually medium size Vidalia onion cut in sort of quarter circles. I'm just going to saute that. I have a pan heating up. I'm just going to stick it in the saute pan. So while these onions are sauteing up, I am going to start the crust and put it in the oven, and then we'll start on the mixture. So I use this Honeyville blanched almond flour, which basically is just, almond flour is really just chopped up almonds, just ground to a fine powder, and then they call it flour. So what I'm going to do is take 2 cups of the almond flour. To that, I'm going to add 3 tablespoons of the coconut flour, but I'm just going to get out a whisk because I like to just break it up. Sometimes there's some lumps in there and I just don't want it lumpy. So just break up some of those lumps. I think it'll make a big difference. And then we're going to add 3 tablespoons of coconut flour. Might even add a little bit more. Probably add about 4 tablespoons this time. Make it just a little richer for this quiche. I'm using a very small quiche pan. I have a bigger one and I almost wish I would use the bigger one because I know this will be a delicious quiche. So again, just mix that in. I am going to stir my onions quickly. Okay, to this I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of melted butter, which I have right here. That's a whole tablespoon. I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of canola oil. This is just Crisco canola oil. And 1 beaten egg. And that's basically the crust. Just add the beaten egg. And from this point we're just going to get a wooden spoon, stir it around. Incorporate that in. I forgot that I also add a teaspoon of baking soda, so I just added that, and I am just putting this into, you know, basically a clump that I am going to work around this quiche pan until it's basically all even. You want it, the bottom and the sides to be the same thickness so it cooks evenly throughout. So I will work on this, show you what it looks like. I'm still working this crust into this pan, but I wanted to show you how I do it. I basically just take some wax paper. I start by just using my knuckles to make a dent all the way around the side and start creating the sides. Then I just basically use 2 fingers and just keep on working the sides. So here's the quiche crust, just pressed all the way through the entire pan. And it took about 3 or 4 minutes just to press it all the way through, make sure it is the same thickness all the way around. And now I'm going to put it in a 400-degree convection oven for about 12 to 15 minutes until it crisps up. And it's different with each pan I use. While the crust is in the oven, I am going to wash and dry some fresh spinach. I don't use the frozen spinach. I'm going to wash, dry, trim off the stems, and then I will julienne cut it, or just rough cut it. Then I'm going to shred some Gruyere cheese, some Monterey Jack cheese, and some Locatelli Parmesan cheese. One of the easiest ways to trim the spinach is to just slice off the stems right where they all meet. If you have a bunch that's, you know, all in one lump. There are some stems in here which we will additionally trim. Then you're just going to stick it in a colander and then wash it really good because spinach, as you know, is very muddy and dirty. A nice quick way to dry your spinach is to start with a salad spinner. You just can basically get a lot of water out of it, as you can see. There's a ton of water at the bottom of here. So we're done with that. You pat it dry and then let it air dry for the remainder. So I peeked in on my quiche crust after a couple minutes and it actually is bubbling, and I just burned myself. So I am going to put some rice or beans on top with some parchment paper and then let it cook the remainder of the way. So here we go with some rice back in the oven. It's going to go, and then I will take it out for the last few minutes just to crisp it up. So now I'm just going to julienne cut the spinach, but you don't even have to julienne it. You could just basically just give it a rough cut. So you just want to go down the leaves and give it kind of a rough cut as you go. You don't want a big leaf in the quiche. You want it to be, you know, bite-sized when someone takes a fork to it. So this is the whole head of spinach, and it looks like it's 3 cups, but when you actually push it all the way down, you're at 2, which is what we need. So now we're going to make the filling now that the pie crust has come out of the oven. And what we're going to do is basically salt the spinach first. Spinach really needs salt. So I'm just going to take some kosher salt and put it through it and just toss it with some salt. And I know Gruyere cheese is a little salty, so you just want to watch the salt and not put that much salt in it. Then I'm going to take 5 eggs, beat them. And again, I would use more eggs if I was using the bigger pie pan, but because I'm using the smaller pie pan, I think 5 eggs will be fine. After I beat these, I am going to add, which I already just freshly grated, 1 cup of Gruyere cheese and 1 cup of Monterey Jack cheese. I'm going to add a little bit of Locatelli Parmesan cheese. So now I'm just going to add a little bit more salt, some fresh ground pepper, all this to taste. I'm going to add the cheese. The Gruyere cheese seems to have clumped a little bit. I'm going to add about, I'm trying to look at my recipe, 3/4 cup of heavy cream. Might do a little bit less. Maybe, yeah, that's 3/4. That should be fine. 3/4 cup of heavy cream. A little splash of milk, probably less than 1/4 cup. Just going to mix this around. I'm going to get a wooden spoon for this. Once you incorporate all this, you're going to add the spinach and the onions, but first I'm just going to add some of this Locatelli cheese, which is the grated Parmesan. I'm going to add a little more pepper. You can add white pepper as well, which goes really well with eggs. I'm going to add the grilled onions. And the spinach. Just going to stir that all together and then just pour it into the pan. That looks pretty perfect. You want it kind of thick, you don't want it watery. Just want to pour it into the pan. This looks like we're going to have the exact amount we need. And then you're going to bake this at 375 for 35 to 40 minutes. You want to make sure that it's cooked all the way through. So I'll show you what it looks like when it comes out of the oven. I'll give you a close-up, but I can't lift it because it's still hot. So that's what it looks like before it goes in the oven. So this quiche just came out of the oven. It looks delicious. It cooked for exactly 37 minutes. So I'm going to let it cool off and then we'll slice it and taste it. So the quiche has been cooling for about 15 minutes. It probably should cool for about 25 minutes to 30 minutes. So I'm just going to cut a piece and then let it sit on the plate so I could taste it. As I cut into it, I see it should probably sit a little longer because it's kind of watery. So I'm just going to cut it. My pie lifter is missing in action, so I am going to use this little spatula. See if I can get it out without breaking it. Oh, it's a pretty solid piece, so that's what it looks like. I'm going to let it cool for a couple minutes longer and then take a bite. So this is the quiche again. It's been sitting for a couple of minutes, so I am going to take a bite. It's still very hot, but I think it'll be good enough to taste. That's the crust. It's nice and brown, really pretty, very solid looking. It's not watery. So I'm going to take a quick bite, give it a taste test. That's the piece. It's not too hot, but it's delicious. I would have to give this a thumbs up as better than the last quiche I made because of probably the Gruyere cheese and the fact that I added salt because the spinach needed some salt. So this is the winner. I will post this recipe. That's what it looks like again, and I think you'll really like it. This is great for breakfast. It's great for lunch. It's great for dinner. It's a great snack. It's all protein, really delicious. So have a great day.